Vehicle
Affirmative.
reporting.
Affirmative. Affirmative.
Acknowledged.
Affirmative. Affirmative.
At once.
Vehicle reporting. Affirmative.
Cannot deploy
Acknowledged.
here.
Affirmative.
New construction options. Building. Construction complete. New construction options. Building.
There is a very unstable situation on the ground that is unfolding very quickly.
Move toward more ideas that will actually help.
Construction complete. New construction options. Building. Construction complete. New construction options. Training. Unit ready. Training. Unit ready. On hold. Cancel. Training. Training.
Yes, sir.
Unit
Very well.
ready.
Reporting. Very well.
Construction complete. Training. Insufficient funds. Unit
Reporting.
ready.
Affirmative. Agreed.
Training.
Affirmative. Acknowledged.
Unit ready.
Acknowledged.
Building.
Reporting. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Yes, sir. Agreed. Agreed.
Construction complete. Building.
There is a very unstable situation on the ground that is unfolding.
Construction complete. Building. Training. Construction complete. Construction options. Construction complete.
Live in a different world.
Building.
Yes, sir.
Training. Unit ready.
Yes, sir.
Training. Unit ready. Training.
Yes, sir. Very well.
Unit
Affirmative.
ready. Construction complete. New construction options.
Very well. Very well. At once. Affirmative.
Building.
Affirmative. Agreed. Agreed. Ready and waiting. Ready and waiting. At once. Of course. Ready and waiting.
Unit
Yes,
ready.
sir.
Yes, sir. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative.
Building.
Affirmative. 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 Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged.
Unit lost. Unit ready.
Acknowledged. At once. Agreed. Very well. Awaiting orders. Affirmative.
Building.
Agreed. Very well. At once. Very well.
Yes, sir. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Base is under attack.
Comrade. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Unit ready.
Acknowledged. Affirmative. 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 Affirmative.
Ready and waiting.
prepared. Our base is under attack. Building.
Comrade? Very well.
Insufficient
At once.
funds.
Very well. Acknowledged. Ready and waiting. Affirmative.
Comrade, acknowledged. Affirmative, acknowledged.
Ready and waiting. At once. Very well.
Reporting. Acknowledged.
Ready and
Reporting.
waiting. Affirmative. Of course.
Unit ready.
Report affirmative. Acknowledged.
Ready and waiting. At once. Affirmative. Very well. At once.
Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged.
Yes, sir.
Unit
At once.
lost.
Yes, sir. Of course. Waiting
Agreed.
orders. Affirmative.
Building.
Ready and waiting. At once. Very well.
Building.
Yes, sir. Agreed. At once.
Unit
Reporting.
ready.
At once. At once. Affirmative.
Construction
Affirmative. Very well.
Unit lost.
Ready and waiting. Affirmative.
New construction
sir.
options.
Affirmative. Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged.
Building.
Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Unit ready.
Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged.
Acknowledged.
Awaiting orders. Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Acknowledged.
Building.
Acknowledged. Affirmative. Vehicle affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Awaiting orders.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Agreed. Affirmative.
Unit ready.
Affirmative. Very
Building.
well. At once. Agreed. Affirmative. Very well. Agreed. Agreed. Affirmative. Very well. Affirmative. Very well.
Awaiting orders.
Unit
Affirmative.
ready. Building. Unit lost.
Acknowledged. Affirmative. Vehicle acknowledged.
Building.
Awaiting orders. Affirmative. Awaiting
Unit
orders.
ready. Building.
Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Insufficient funds.
Affirmative. Acknowledged. 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 Affirmative. Affirmative.
Construction complete.
Acknowledged. 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 Affirmative. 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 Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged.
Unit ready.
Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative.
New construction options. Building. Construction complete.
Vehicle
Building.
reporting. Acknowledged.
Construction complete.
Reporting. Acknowledged. Waiting order. Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Reporting. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. 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 Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Building. Cannot deploy here. Building. On hold. Construction complete. Building. On hold. Building. Unit ready. Construction complete. Cannot deploy here. Building. Construction complete. Building.
Yes, sir. Acknowledged.
Vehicle reporting. Affirmative.
Building.
Yes, sir. Vehicle reporting. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. 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 Acknowledged.
Construction complete.
Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Unit ready.
Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Building.
Yes, sir. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Building. Unit ready.
Comrade. Acknowledged. Affirmative. 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 Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. 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 Affirmative.
Construction
Affirmative.
complete. Unit ready.
Affirmative. 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 Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative. 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 Affirmative.
Unit ready. Building. New construction options.
Report affirmative. Acknowledged.
Building. Unit ready. Building. On hold. Cancel.
Report acknowledged. Affirmative.
Construction complete.
Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative.
Unit ready.
Acknowledged.
Building.
Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged.
Unit ready.
Affirmative. Acknowledged.
Building.
Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. 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 Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged.
Unit ready.
Acknowledged.
Building.
Affirmative. 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 Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative.
New construction options. Unit ready. Building. Building. Construction complete. Cannot deploy here. Unit ready. Building. Unit ready.
Awaiting
Building.
orders.
Cancel. Construction complete.
Awaiting acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged.
Unit ready.
Acknowledged. Acknowledged.
Unit ready.
Yes, sir.
Building.
Affirmative. Acknowledged. Reporting. Affirmative. Reporting. Affirmative.
Building. Unit
Yes,
ready.
acknowledged.
Yes, sir.
Construction
Affirmative.
complete.
Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Reporting. Affirmative. Affirmative.
Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Unit ready. Building. Cancel. Building. Construction complete. Building. Construction complete. Building.
Reporting. Acknowledge. Waiting for
Unit
acknowledge,
ready.
sir. Acknowledge.
Building. Construction complete.
Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Reporting. Affirmative.
Reporting. Affirmative. Acknowledged.
Yes, sir. Acknowledged.
Reporting. Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Unit ready.
Awaiting orders.
Building.
Acknowledged. Affirmative. Reporting. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Unit
Acknowledged.
ready.
Affirmative.
Building.
Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Yes, sir. Affirmative.
On hold. Cancel. Building.
Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Affirmative. Yes, sir.
Unit
Affirmative.
ready.
Yes, sir.
Building.
Affirmative. Affirmative. Report acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged.
Unit ready.
Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. 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 Vehicle acknowledged. Affirmative. Awaiting orders. Acknowledged. Acknowledged.
Yes, sir.
Awaiting orders. Affirmative.
Reporting. Affirmative.
Awaiting orders. Acknowledged. Acknowledged.
Building.
Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Vehicle reporting.
Reporting. Affirmative.
Construction
Affirmative.
complete.
Reporting. Affirmative.
Primary building selected. Building. Unit ready.
Reporting. Acknowledged. Waiting order. Waiting order. Affirmative.
Yes, sir.
Waiting order. Comrade. Affirmative. Affirmative. Waiting affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged.
Awaiting orders. Acknowledged.
Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Waiting order.
Vehicle report. Acknowledged.
Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Awaiting orders. Acknowledged.
Comrade. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Affirmative.
Vehicle reporting. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged.
Yes, sir. Comrade. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative. 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 Affirmative.
Vehicle reporting. Affirmative. Affirmative. Affirmative.
Waiting order.
Mission failed. Mission failed. Mission loaded.
If we want to live in a different world.
Training. Unit ready.
Affirmative. Affirmative.
Building. Construction complete. Cannot deploy here. Primary building selected.
There is a very unstable situation
Building.
on the ground.
On hold.
It is unfolding very
Cancel.
quickly.
Building.
Move toward more ideas.
Unit
Comrade.
ready.
Affirmative.
Engineering. Affirmative.
Bring this thing to an end.
Comrade.
Silos
Affirmative.
needed.
Reporting. Affirmative.
Awaiting orders. Affirmative.
Comrade. Affirmative.
Yes,
Silence
affirmative.
needed. Mission accomplished.